Arnold had a question about whether there'll be online participation in that conference as well, or you'll be able to engage
Yes,
with that.
the Kelvin January series will be streaming some of the keynotes online.
Oh,
So those of you
okay.
who are far flung or don't have money from the dean to go can tune into those at least. But all of the sessions will be closed sessions for registrants. But
Excellent.
So the January series will be streaming the October conference. Well
the
done.
January series is actually
Yeah,
streaming in more times of the year. They've
January has
expanded.
now taken over.
Yeah, it's still called the January series though,
Okay.
but look for that. But if you can join us, I think it's going to be an amazing dialogue. We've got Andy Crouch, of course.
mhm.
Paola Bonanti is the Pope's AI guy. He's going to be one of the
All right.
keynote speaker. He advises Pope Leo in the Vatican, and I found a lot of overlap between Reformed Protestant thinking and Catholic
Yeah,
social thought on these technical issues.
yeah. It's an
We can
encyclical.
certainly work
Yeah.
together. And there's this encyclical coming out soon. And we've got the deputy director of AI at the CIA coming. We have, Ryan Struck, who's a Kelvin alumni, director of AI innovation at CNN. I mean, it's full of rock stars, and and
Yeah.
so encourage
Who,
you all to
who,
come if you
yeah.
can make
Whose brainchild was that? Who organized that? You,
it.
you, you and
I put in a grant request to kick it off, but I have had a whole bunch of people helping me
excellent.
with all of the logistics that are part of that. So yeah,
Well, yeah, that sounds very excellent. Um,
yes,
just a quick note. I think I've got most of your email addresses, but if not, or just want to be sure, put it in the chat. And uh, Derek, I think you will also be able to share the PowerPoint. This will be recorded and shared, but there will be PowerPoint and there'll be an AI summary of this as well. So see how well
oh boy,
our AI
hopefully no mis
assistant does.
hopefully no misinformation. Yeah,
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 we'll have to check. It's about probably 90% correct. But thank you. That very clear, very concise, very compelling presentation. Huge number of resources, which we'll kind of distill and certainly, I think some of the articles that you've written recently, if you send me I could probably put those together as well. If there's a little bit of a follow-up note for this discussion. But thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to our audience here to ask questions and make comments.
Derek, it's Jonathan Wellham here. I enjoyed the
Yeah.
presentation. There was many, many excellent components to it. I'm curious when you talk about the interfaith, where do you see differences if you're dealing with Muslims or Hindus and stuff like that, would have fundamentally different sort of presuppositions and starting points in terms of the image of God on man and so forth. Do they approach when you sit down with them and approach the AI issue a little differently? I'm curious about that. I've never
Yeah.
when you mentioned the interfaith, I hadn't really thought about that aspect of it, but
Right.
they obviously you're coming at it from, creation, fall, redemption,
yeah,
consummation, and the biblical narrative. I'm
yeah.
just curious how the non-Christian oriented faiths and not even non-Jewish would maybe approach AI or have concerns like the Hindus or Muslims.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Of course, I can't speak for the other faiths, but in my experience, for instance,
Mm,
conversing across lines in Abrahamic traditions, like
mm,
the Jewish and Muslim traditions, they they have a sense of the dignity of the human person and the image of God, for instance, which is a profound starting point. It's very different than a secular materialist assumption about what it means to be human, which leads you to different conclusions.
right.
Um, and I admit in some areas the lowest common denominator in terms of things that you share are limited. But when you're able to come alongside people of differing beliefs to actually advocate for certain kinds of regulation or certain kinds of directions for AI, you actually amplify your voice and your ability to do work for the common good. So we need
Mm,
to look for these things, right? I mean, that's part of the hard job of politics too, right? Is trying to find consensus on things that you can agree on and then working together. I think if Christians are just going to stay in their own echo chamber, our influence in this powerful world that
Right.
is economically, internationally, so large is going to be very limited. And that's why I think, especially, looking for alliances with people in the Catholic tradition and other Christian traditions, working across these divides is essential, especially if we care about justice and we care
Mhm.
about our neighbor, to find as many voices that we can work around. So AI and Faith is an organization that was
Right.
specifically assembled for that purpose to gather more voices around the table and to have more influence. And they've actually been featured in the New York Times and have actually been invited to gather around the table when these conversations are happening in different places. Um, I talked with someone just a week or two ago who was invited with a bunch of Christians to Anthropic, the creators of Claude, as part of a
Mhm.
delegation of Christians who they're consulting to say, okay, what input, what insights do you have that can help us shape a better product? And yeah, the more the larger voice that we can gather, the more opportunities for influence, and for helping um, helping influence this technology, it'll increase. So it's something that I think we ought to be doing.
Mhm.
Right, right. No, 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 agreed. I was just curious in terms of some of those differences. I mean, in the investment business, I mean, just the hyperscalers alone are going to put over $2 trillion
Yeah.
last year, this year, next year, just in data centers. These
Right.
are massive amounts of investment. It's quite interesting that we've gone from sort of a green agenda globally, which I don't agree with, but to now we're going to have to exploit resources of the world at a record pace. You got from one
Right.
extreme to the next.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the biggest beneficiaries would be the mining industry, all globally, to extract the resources to be able to produce all of this technology that we're now preoccupied with. So it's going to be quite interesting.
And this
Interesting
is
shift.
probably a little off
Yep.
script, but I think Christians should also think about their ethical responsibilities in terms of where they invest their money, in terms of,
Right.
whether we're helping nudge and bring shalom nearer, or whether our investments are creating more problems for the world. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
another conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well, thank you very much,
You're.
Derek. It was some
Yeah.
good thoughts and
Yep.
excellent. Yeah.
Yep.
So I have a couple questions, if I may. I'll start with
Sure.
one. So I have, some people I interact with who say, well, we just should not do anything at all with AI. Like, I'm just going to like ban it entirely. I will never use it. I will never let my students use it. I will never let it in my house, kind of thing. And I'm maybe you've interacted with people on that too, and I'd like to see what you have to say about that. One of my responses is you already use AI.
Mhm.
And so when you write an email, there's going to be a completed, word completion happens. It's pretty standard in most email.
Or
And
Google
so,
search. Yeah.
or
Mhm.
Google search, or, if you're using a GPS in your car, or if you're using any sort of technology, any sort of IT has AI operating within it already. I mean, it's very rare, I suppose, to get something that doesn't already have AI involved. And so you either have to become a total Luddite if you want to be consistent, or you have to maybe think of how do I discern what do I mean by saying I don't want to use any AI at all.
Right.
And it reminds me of a church that I'm aware of that there was this gentleman who was very much against the idea of heart transplants. And when in the 70s, he was very much against this. And then it turned out heart transplants started happening, and then it turned out he needed a heart transplant.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden, he was very much in favor of heart transplants.
Yes, he
Mhm.
And
was.
so, when AI is used to do wonderful things, like develop cures for cancer, or to recognize tumors more rapidly, or to
Right.
do any other kinds of scientific advances that people are going to be benefiting from, it seems like you're going to be using or at least benefiting from AI in some way. I wonder if you have some other aspects of how one could respond to someone's desire to not have anything to do with AI.
Yeah, and I think sometimes those instincts come from seeing it used improperly, and
Right.
uh, and so I think that's where the concept of structure and direction can be really, really helpful, right? This idea that it's part of the possibilities in creation. Exactly. Creation Regained is a wonderful summary of some of those concepts, right? Like it's like if someone heard some bad music and they would say we should ban music, right? Well, that's not an appropriate response. The
Mhm.
question is, okay, you know, what should music sound like? How should we
Question.
develop it? How should we, And so the same question with AI, you can give all kinds of examples of things probably that we ought not to be using it for, but that doesn't mean that it isn't, that there isn't some creational directions that it could be put towards that might be really helpful and loving ways to use it that would honor God and show love for our neighbors and so on. So yeah. So the question is not, is not is AI good or bad? The question is how should it be directed, right? We have to avoid this sort of false dichotomy, and so yeah, structured direction I think is a helpful corrective for that kind of impulse. And to be honest with you, I'm seeing it across campus, right? People. I mean, I'm kind of generalizing, but people in the humanities tend to be more against it. People on the business side seem to be wholeheartedly embracing it. Some,
Yeah.
and the whole spectrum in between. And so even on a typical university campus, you're seeing a microcosm of some of these different responses. And even students themselves, right? Students tend to be enthusiastic technology adopters. I'm finding a lot of our students, even in computer science, are a little reticent about AI because they're seeing some of the ways that it's already, you know, causing some uncertainty and even harm in some places, right? So yeah, that would be my tact in
Right.
answer to that.
It's a sense it's a good servant but a bad master if you have the
Yes.
right heart
Yeah.
orientation. Can you comment on the impact on biblical studies? You just mentioned in passing, but it seems that's been quite huge and significant in terms of the understanding the different languages, texts, and doing analysis of scripture itself.
Yeah, scripture translation, which is not, I'm not a
Yeah.
linguist. It's not my area, but I had the privilege. It was actually one of the ASA meetings
All right.
2 or 3 years ago. Was in Washington D.C. and there was a pre-conference workshop for people who were involved in Bible translation at the Museum of the Bible in Washington
All
D.C.
right.
And I attended that, and I got an opportunity to talk to folks who are on the front lines with translating the scripture, right, in organizations like Wycliffe and others, all kinds of others. And they've said that this has actually accelerated their ability to do biblical translation, especially if you have a related language
Right.
that's already been translated, or you have some linguistic links that you can use. And if there's a corpus of examples of other things, I mean, all of us have probably used Google Translate at some point, and it's not perfect, but it can grab a large chunk of text and translate it very rapidly. And so these tools are actually really, really helpful. Going back to the one comment about AI bringing about the new
Mm.
heavens and the new earth, uh, um, the, there's one way where AI may actually help bring about the new heavens and the new earth, right? Jesus said, and it's not by making everything perfect on earth. Jesus said that, first the gospel should be preached to all nations, and then the end will come. So, if
Yeah.
AI can help us preach the gospel to
Yeah.
all nations, and so all nations can hear it in their own tongue, maybe it will contribute to the coming of the kingdom. But it won't do it by solving all of humanity's problems, right?
Yeah.
That's not how it will do it. But if we can put it in service of the gospel and the kingdom, maybe it can help bring the kingdom nearer. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
So
good.
my other question, if I may, is
Yes.
about environmental impacts of AI,
Oh yeah,
and I mean, there's people that I'm familiar with as well who say I don't want to have anything to do with AI because of
yeah,
its AI, its environmental impacts, and the understanding is that these massive data centers that are used to do the AI work that is being requested of its various servers, are huge um, sinks of energy and producers of CO2 and wasters of, heat,
Water
and
too.
they're often held in locations or where air conditioning has to happen. And so the desire to not be involved with that is partly based on not wanting to contribute to environmental challenges
Yeah.
of contributing to global warming and climate change that AI does. And I haven't done an analysis, and I'm wondering if you are familiar with like an analysis of what is the energy requirement for AI work as compared to doing it in other ways. So if
Yeah.
I'm trying to do a little project here where I'm gonna, take a page of handwritten text and convert it into readable, computer readable text and do a scan and get AI to do that, it'll take a little bit of time. If I do that myself, I'm going to have to hit my keyboard a bunch of times. I'm going to have to like look at it and stare at it, and it's going to take me a few minutes, and it will take AI a lot less time. It's going to still
Yes.
take resources to do that, but the
Yes.
resources are being used in a different way. Maybe I'll have more time to relax in my backyard because I've gotten that extra work done. So I don't know what is your thought about the environmental impacts of AI?
Yeah, no, this is a wonderful question, and I mean this gets to the stewardship norm that I was talking
Right.
about earlier, and it is true. I mean, there are huge data centers going up rapidly, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure, and as you say, like using power in places where power is scarce, emitting greenhouse gases, being powered by grids that aren't completely clean, and consuming water for cooling. And and so the question is, how should we respond to this? And I've talked to I won't use his name, but to a respected computer scientist who has decided not to use AI, or not to use it much for that very reason. And I respect that. I read an article, and these numbers are probably proprietary and always changing, about how much energy is used for a query. And for a typical text query of, under, I don't know, 100 tokens or something like this, they said it's about equivalent to running a microwave oven for, I don't know, these are rough numbers
Right.
from memory here, but 3 to 6 seconds or something like that. Um, and so the question is, okay, I mean, I use my microwave oven to heat up food when I need it. I can use it responsibly. Um, so when I'm making a query, that's kind of the amount of energy usage that I'm looking at. To do a Google search, and that's a proprietary number too, I'm sure, is not free either. I mean, every time you queue up a Netscape movie that you stream, all the data switches and data centers running your video feed also require power. So all of these decisions that we make require that.
Yeah.
Now, I would say there are some AI requests that are much more intensive. I'm looking, there was an article that was written just recently that sort of went through this. And I think maybe it was MIT Technology Review. But they said things like creating videos or image manipulation actually require much, much more power. So knowing that, I would say, well, if I want to make a funny cat video or a funny picture, maybe I should think twice about whether I really need to be consuming, whatever it is in terms of energy in order to do something. But if I'm actually doing work, legitimate work, that's helpful. Just like we're using Zoom right now, right, which is
Right.
using energy in data centers, and packets that are whirring all over the internet. That we use it responsibly, that we're consuming energy, but we're using it in ways that are responsible. So, and I actually don't think the future might be in massive data centers. I think they're going to be needed for training just because of the scale of the data. But actually, you can download some of these models, right? There are open source models that can actually fit on a respectable laptop. I've actually run some of them, not the biggest ones, on my own laptop, my own MacBook Pro. Right? Llama and others can actually be run if you've got GPUs, especially on your computer. And my laptop, it's an ARM-based processor. The GPUs probably use more power, but it's measured in the order of tens of watts. So I think there may be opportunities to use these models, and maybe not general models, but models that are tuned for specific application domains, right? So that you're not dealing with trillions of parameters, but sort of smaller models that can actually use far less energy and power. But I think that question needs to be answered. Maybe we don't need to make a new release of a large language model every 3 months or something like that, because that's where you're running these data centers day and night, and consuming the amount of energy equivalent to a large town. So I agree, and I think also there needs to be regulation about where these data centers get built, about the power sources that are used to make sure that vulnerable populations don't end up having to pay for this, that greenhouse gases are not increased unnecessarily, that water usage. I mean, there are different ways of cooling these things that don't result in like grabbing treated water from the mains, right, in order to cool, finding more better solutions to that. So, um, so that those are some of my thoughts. These are the kinds of ways that we need to move forward if we're going to use these things responsibly, um, personally and then corporately and nationally. Yeah,
Mhm.
Thanks, Derek, and
yeah,
for these great responses and for all
Yeah,
your work on this on AI and the biblical story that you've been
right.
so
yeah.
free with sharing in many contexts and in your writing and speaking. So thanks for joining us today.
Yep.
Thank
Very good.
you for listening. And I must confess, I my opening slide had an AI generated image that I didn't need to generate. So I'll confess that as
All
well.
right.
I wonder, can I ask a question?
Please. Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Sherman, for your most informative presentation. But I'm wondering if you could comment more about the challenge we're facing today, and that the rapid pace of AI development is outpacing
Mm,
legislation.
Yeah.
And do you see that there's a greater need for faster government action to protect society, to protect our children in particular? I just, a
mm,
few weeks ago, I was helping my little niece with a school project, and I was just shocked that uh, instead of thinking through a problem, this young child, referred to AI. And I'm thinking, is this a challenge for our children, in that it affects their ability in critical thinking? And
mm,
is it
Mhm.
really diminishing humanity as well? I mean, there are a lot of good things, obviously, about
yeah.
AI that you've
Yeah.
stated, but there are some real challenges. And to see that AI is outpacing legislation, do you see that as
Yeah.
a big concern?
Yes.
Mm,
Um, I think, in the educational domain, schools can act without needing government legislation. I think teachers and educators and people who think about pedagogy and child development,
right.
I think the social science already is telling us, that not just AI, but screens in general have
Right.
had a bad impact. I mean, the recent book by Haidt, right, Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation,
Right.
is showing all kinds of, I mean, basically it underscores, the notion that technology is not neutral, which I think as
Right.
Christians should not be a surprise, right? We live coram Deo. Everything we do is a response that's either obedient or towards less obedient directions. And they have consequences because the world's tuned that way. It has norms. So yeah, I think Jonathan Haidt's book already, is a warning. And are we going to, do the same thing we did with laptops in the classroom and social media? Are we going to be a little smarter with how we unroll this new technology in the classroom?
Yeah.
And I think educators, especially, what you mentioned, education,
Yeah.
need to be thinking about the pedagogical implications. I think at universities, it's thrown us into a bit of a tizzy. Like the
Right.
the, the college essay was sort of the gold standard for measuring, how well people were thinking, and how well they were able to put an argument together, and how well they've done their research. And of course, now a machine can spit out a college essay that's better than what most students can do. So I think we've been thrown off balance. How do we, how do we proceed in a way where we still have students exercising their own their own mind, right, in all these different areas. Someone likened it to, like you can go to the gym and take a forklift along with you to sort of lift all the weights. Uh, right. And so, yeah, you'll lift the weights, you'll do how many reps you need to do, whatever, but you won't gain. And in fact, you'll get weaker, right? This is kind of an interesting spin on, Marshall McLuhan, who talked about how, the backhoe operator amplifies sort of the human arm, but it also makes the operator's arm weaker than it would have been if they had used a shovel. So I think in universities and schools especially, we're going to be you need to think about how do we help people to think so they don't offload all of their thinking to machines. And at Calvin already, we've been having discussions. There's professors going back to the blue books, the examination booklets where you have to write your exams free of technology and computers. In computer science, we actually have our tests on paper, and we do work in the classroom where we can control access to AI. Now, later on in computer science, our students need to learn how to be able to develop in a world of AI. And so, in our third and fourth years, we encourage students to turn on AI and be able to use it fully. But in the first few years of learning languages and data structures and algorithms and all of these sort of core concepts, we severely limit the access to AI so that students can do that work in the gym of building their muscles, and then in terms of, nationally, you're talking about legislation. I think, governments certainly have a place to limit. I think if we let these companies just run
Yeah.
with the motivations that they have and the incentives, for market dominance and the next quarter earnings and whatever else it is, we're going to end up in a place we don't want to be. I think the European Union has been a leader in showing what kind of legislation, what it might look like, setting up basically identifying AIs that are actually usages of AI and machine learning that we won't allow, right? Mass surveillance of populations, these sorts of things. Then
Mm.
they talk about usages of AI and machine learning that are dangerous or that have potential bad outcomes that need to be tested in a sandbox, kind of like an AI crash testing center where you actually test these things before you unleash them. And then they identify a category of AI machine learning that maybe is much lower risk and doesn't need as much
Mm.
regulative oversight. And so sort of like, and which I think is a common sense approach to thinking about this stuff. And I think, unfortunately, in America right now, they're kind of behind on thinking about these things. I haven't followed what's been happening in Canada lately, but I think also internationally we have to have
Yep.
uh,
Yeah.
some thinking about this as well, just for the good of people in the planet. Right. And that
Yeah.
that may actually involve restrictions for data centers. It'll certainly involve restrictions of the kinds of areas we ought to be using AI for. I'm positive the social science will show in time with more and more certainty that AI companions are a really bad idea, especially for children.
Right.
And so I think legislation is going to have to be active in that to protect people and the common good.
Mm.
Derek, I
Yeah.
last time I met you here at one of these Oak Center conversations,
A few years
you
back.
were talking about ethics in I don't know if it was in computer science or engineering or what, but
Okay.
um, uh, you mentioned that two of the leading professional groups in computer engineering and software, like the
Mm.
ACM and the IEEE, they
Yeah.
both have codes of ethics.
Yes.
And their codes of ethics so far have been based more or less on Judeo-Christian principles. And that was deliberate and it's in place. Um, these probably need to be revised to add some more stuff related to AI. Not sure whether anyone's working on that or not. But that raises a couple of concerns. In 1942, I believe, Isaac Asimov published his Three Laws for Robotics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Robots are not allowed to hurt people, and robots have to obey people.
Right.
humans, so that they can't take over from humans. These are fundamental laws of robotics.
And they can
Um,
only protect themselves if it doesn't violate the first two laws.
exactly,
Right.
right? So those are the three laws.
Yeah.
And they and what we're seeing today is autonomous drones
Yeah.
being used in warfare to take over positions and kill the enemy and all of that, which violates all of Asimov's rules, which makes me a bit pessimistic about whether someone who's a technology person who's disconnected from a Christian heritage or some other such heritage, whether they'll be able to come up with rules that actually mean anything. And just a final point on this, when we look at who is leading the violation of Asimov's laws for robotics, it's governments, particularly their military arms. So why should we trust government to be able to legislate the right kind of limitations on AI?
Yeah. No, this
Good
is, I
question.
mean,
Yeah.
there's a couple issues there. The issue of lethal autonomous robots
Yeah.
is one that's been wrangled with. And yeah, I think the just war principles that Christianity has had for millennia, I guess goes back to Saint Augustine even, right? Are things that we need to be thinking about. How can you hold someone justly responsible when you have a lethal autonomous robot that you unleash? I think there's some severe questions about responsibility, about protecting non-combatants and
Mhm.
all that sort of stuff, for sure. I think you're right, that not everyone will recognize Judeo-Christian values, but I think there are some common things that we can begin with. Like if you look at some of the um, you know um, work that's been done internationally, thinking about human rights and these sorts of things, which sort of begin with a notion of human dignity, even though it's not for most people, it's not, or many people, it's not rooted in the Imago Dei. It's still like a starting point we can work with to kind of think about these things. This is yeah, this is not easy wrangling with this stuff. The norms that I listed, justice, social norms, cultural norms, um, trust. Um, I have seen published in secular journals these sort of, normative aspects that are actually based on Christian philosophy, have actually found their way into some secular publications because people recognize them, even if they don't recognize God. If you recognize that creation is tuned in a certain way, and so I think there still are ways to bring Christian thinking to people who can recognize sort of normative aspects in creation, but it's gonna take a lot of effort and participation in this ongoing dialogue. And that's why groups like AI and Faith are trying to band together as interfaith groups in order to have impacts on governments. We need a larger voice if we're going to have impacts, which means we need to build, links with people broadly on some of these topics towards the common good, and also internationally. And so I think this is going to be one of the challenges, and maybe we need to build Christian think tanks and other organizations to help with that. Um, and yeah, this is an issue that's not just going to be one that the church has to have on its own,
Mm.
but it needs to engage in more broadly. This is why the Center for Faith and Technology has been a dream of mine for a long time, is one
Mhm.
one way of having resources to join that conversation more broadly. Um, so yeah,
Big, yeah.
there's lots of challenges there, and yeah, there's people who have fundamentally different worldview beliefs that will come to different conclusions about these things. Um, AI in warfare, I think, also has the
Yes.
possibility of providing immense defensive capabilities. You think about these drones that can intercept incoming missiles. That's something a human can't steer. an object remotely, right? That's the to a supersonic missile that's coming in. But you think about an AI system that's designed to protect, right? That's designed to to intercept incoming threats. Think about cyber warfare, AI systems that can actually dynamically adjust and protect incoming
Yeah.
cyber threats. I mean, AI can be used in warfare in a defensive way. I think that can be
Right.
really, really, really helpful. And I think there are ways to think about using it to provide better intel about what things are happening so you can make wiser decisions with a human in the loop about how to act on the battlefield as well. So, yeah, that's a complex issue. There's a Christian philosopher in the Netherlands who's been writing about AI and warfare. Christine,
Right.
um, her last name escapes me right now, but
Right.
Beltzhausen, who's actually been writing using Reformed philosophy and thinking about AI and warfare. Um, and that's an important area for us to join the conversation in as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think China becomes a big wild card here because the norms we're talking about don't have the currency there in terms of the way in which the culture and society is controlled
Mm.
top down, and how, I think there's concern there as to how this will develop within the context of China and what that will
Yeah.
lead to. So,
Yeah. It is
but
working on
seriously, yeah,
treaties and international treaties and so on that can be nudged closer to, just
yeah,
principles of war
yeah,
if
it's
necessary. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, look, I thank you, Derek,
Yeah.
for your very insightful presentation and responses to questions, and your walking encyclopedia of references to we need to
Yeah.
capture some of that in bit of a short summary and list of references we'll perhaps do after this. But it's uh, clearly you've been doing a lot of teaching, thinking, and research here. That's extremely helpful. And having the Christian think tank where you are would be a helpful enterprise as well, because it's.
Yeah.
I think what's one striking is the speed at which these
Yes.
changes now. It simply, like 5 years ago, where were we?
Yeah.
It's just the speed is extremely disruptive there.
Yeah. If you have a benefactor who's got a lot of money that would like to make
Yeah,
that center a reality, you
that's
could
right.
you could invite them to contact me.
I've got your email
Yeah.
address. I'll give them your
Yes.
email address.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds good. Um, well, thank you, everyone.
Mhm.
Any final questions? I have this recorded, and we'll put this together, and you'll get a copy following, as well as the transcript from the discussion. So.